You're listening to the Farm Report Podcast with Jake and Corey, brought to you by Indians Baseball Insider and broadcast on the Smoke Signals Podcast Network. We're talking Tribe.
Listen, let's play ball. Shoot me around. Let's play ball, baby. Bang down the stones. Play ball.
Well, good day, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever and whenever you have to be tuning in, we are glad to have you aboard. I am Jake Dungan, minor league content coordinator for Indians Baseball Insider, and this is the Farm Report Podcast. I am joined, as always, by the Mahoney Valley Scrappers beat writer for IBI, Corey Crisan. And Corey, man, what were we just talking last week about the Indians pitching depth in Columbus and whether or not they were going to make a move, send down Cody Anderson, and bring up one of the other young guys that they have in Columbus? And lo and behold, look who's starting tonight on Wednesday night for the Indians.
Yeah, it's like they were listening to us. Good to be back, Jake. Mike Clevinger is an Indian. He's no longer a Clipper. Good to see that, and I think it's well-deserved for him. You of course, seeing him in Akron last year. He got the call to AAA last year at the end, and then it blossomed, I think, into a great pitcher that if he gets the chance, I think he can have longevity in that rotation, Jake. I love what I saw from him in AAA this year. The numbers dictate that. He's making his first career start tonight. We're recording it Wednesday against Cincinnati. So those listening later in the week, you'll kind of get your own little taste. You'll have your own thoughts about him. But, hey, for us, we're watching it live really right now. And, of course, those that are listening are hearing this later in the week and in the future. So an exciting time right now for Tribe fans, Jake.
Yeah, as we're recording this, I got to watch the first inning of the game where Clevinger pitched, and he looked pretty sharp. First pitch of the game to Zach Cozart was lined in the left field. He's really settled in, and as a matter of fact, his first career major league strikeout was one you can certainly brag about in the years to come. It was Joey Votto, who he got swinging for the second out of the first inning. So that's definitely got some bragging rights there. Not an easy guy to strike out for your first major league punch out.
Oh, for sure, Joey Votto as the former MVP. But hey, in addition to Clevinger getting called up, there's a couple of players that are familiar to us that got sent down, and we're going to talk about them, of course, in this podcast, in this episode. So I'm excited to get going, Jake. Glad to be back.
Yeah, same here. I like with Clevinger, I got to know him a little bit last year in Akron. Got to watch him pitch. Obviously, the stuff there that he has is definitely electric and definitely worth the risk not really the risk that the Indians took, because they traded an ailing Vinny Pastano for him way back when, a couple years ago. But Indians, and I talked to him about this and talked to the Akron coaching staff about this at the time. It's been almost a complete revamp as far as his mechanics go, his stuff goes. I mean, I think the stuff was always there, because you look at his numbers throughout his career, going back to the years in the Angels system, always been there, even though the numbers overall may not have been as dominant as they have been with the Indians. But he's always been a guy who can get the strikeouts and the swings and misses. And since he's come over here, he's been able to kind of put the rest of the pieces of that puzzle together, and now he's getting the rest. He's not allowing hits, he's not walking many batters, and he's getting the swings and misses. So once you get get that foundation of the swings and misses in place like he had, and then build something around it like the Indians managed to do with him, then you got a pretty nice product and probably a potential top of the rotation starter. And I was watching him tonight. That he has already looks electric, and he was getting some pretty awkward swings from the Reds batters, including Joey Votto. So, he's got the fastball mid-90s. He's got that slider changeup, which is upper 80s. He's got a nice big curveball. So, yeah, if he stays up, which if this start is an early indicator, it looks like he might be here for a little while, as Cody Anderson is second, sent down to Columbus to work things out. But I'm definitely excited, as we've said since the beginning of this podcast, with what this guy brings to the table. And we were talking last week about some of the guys that the Indians could bring up, whether it be Ryan Merritt, the left-hander, or Will Roberts, the kind of grinder. And those two guys, one of those two guys we might see in this upcoming doubleheader, I think, is against the White Sox. But I didn't think that the Indians would go bold and bring up, and I think we were both in agreement that the Indians were probably not going to go bold and bring up Clevinger this early. But I tell you what, couldn't be more happy to admit I'm wrong in this case.
Oh, for sure. I'm happy to see that he's up. And the thing I like about Clevinger, Jake, is that he can mix his fastball location. He could throw it inside to lefties. He could throw it inside to righties, and vice versa, outside to either hand. He's got the nice little deception in his delivery. It's a quick delivery, and he can pull back, low to mid-90s on the fastball, but he can pull back and get you, in about 96 miles an hour. He can pull back and get it for you. So another thing, you mentioned the curveball. I love that power slider he has. He's already, he's got a couple strikeouts in his debut, and one of them was a very nice slider he threw. He located it into, I believe it was a righty. He kind of went front door on it and located it on the outside portion of the plate and got him swinging. So the ability to do that, to locate that slider down and away to right-handed hitters, is the key. And that slider he has is just fast enough. It's not exactly the sharpest break you want on it, but it's good enough to where he can locate it and go for that out. And, yeah, we talk about other guys in AAA like Merritt or Roberts or even a TJ House. And Clevinger was a guy we knew he was going to be up pretty much in Cleveland this season. It was just a matter of when. And I think that Tribe fans, if he can stick up in Cleveland, I wouldn't ever move him back to the bullpen. I would not do that in Cleveland, or for the sake of conversation in AAA, I would never move him out of that rotation. He could be a number 2 guy for sure. Certainly on a low end, I think a 3 or 4 guy at worst, and that's still pretty darn good, especially with this Indians rotation. Top 10 in the league in terms of batting average against. They're tops in the strikeout column. So it's just a nice bonus to have a guy like this that's ready to go. He's ready to come up. And let's not forget, he's coming off the birth of his first child, so he's on a personal high. So he has to be feeling pretty good about himself.
Yeah, how about that? They get your first kid's born, you get called up to the show in the span of a couple weeks. So that's quite a roller coaster ride for a couple weeks. But come on, Corey, let's be honest. How about the hair? How can you not pitch well with that hair?
Flowing locks. They call it show hair, Jake. He's got mad show hair. We love it.
Certainly the Mets love it over there in Queens with Jacob deGrom and Noah Syndergaard over there. So now we got some flowing locks over here in Cleveland's rotation, which is probably the number 2 rotation in baseball behind New York. But let's move on to kind of the other side of this transaction that brought Clevinger to Cleveland. It was kind of a two-parter. 2 guys ended up going down because one, they activated Lonnie Chisenhall off the bereavement list, but with him activated, Cody Anderson was sent down to AAA. He was obviously struggling. There's no question about that. And they had to send down Tyler Naquin as well, who there's been of that argument, some saying that it was unjustified, some saying that if you're on the Indian side, they said there's some things he needs to work on, such as like his fielding. Man, you look at his fielding numbers and metrics; they haven't been kind to him in his brief time in Cleveland. Let's talk about Cody Anderson though, and what's so baffling to me about Anderson is that this is the second season in a row where he's come into spring training with the coaching staff, the team, and everybody pretty much really praising his off-season work regimen. and how much work he had put in. He had lost some weight, added some velocity. And I remember 2 seasons ago when he was coming off that awful season in Akron, everybody was talking about how much work he had put in during the off season and praising it. And he came out and he just dominated it at AA, dominated at AAA, and had a good run in Cleveland once he got called up. Now this year, kind of same situation. He gets praised for his off-season work, and now he seems to be lost on the mound. He's giving up a bunch of home runs, can't get the ball down consistently. Mechanical, the added velocity is kind of struggling to harness it. Maybe it's mental because he has been known to let his frustration get to him at times. Corey, what do you think is wrong with Cody Anderson from what you've seen?
If I can use an analogy for this, and those that have known me for a while, I was not exactly the most athletic guy. I've lost a little bit of weight, over the course of the past few months, and I'm a golfer. So when I went out, last year in the fall when I was a little bit bigger versus now when I lost a little weight, I got a little, thinner, my swing changed. My swing became a little faster. I strike the ball at a quicker, swing speed. It might translate the same to pitching. Think about it. If you lose a little bit of weight, your body's going to be a little lighter. It's going to be a little more lean, a little more, you can get a little more wind under it, so to speak. So Cody losing a little more weight, he may not have found his timing right in his mechanics with his throw. And, I'm relating that to my golf swing with my body and my torque and how I rotate hips. You got hip rotation and the mechanics and the delivery. You got the arm slot. Maybe it's an issue with his mechanics. That's a film study, that could help take care of that. But I'm looking at Cody right now. He's got an ERA around 8. The thing about him, though, his strikeout numbers on pace to, if he would put consistent starts forward this season, they would definitely surpass what he put forward in 15 as far as a ratio goes. But, Jake, in 6 starts this season, 7 appearances, opponents are hitting .359 off of Anderson as an Indian pitcher this year. That is not going to cut it at any level. Any lineup hitting 359 off of him. So maybe it's a mechanic thing. I don't know if it's going to be a head thing. He lost a little more weight coming into this season than he did going into last season. So that could be it. But, we talked last week about the depth in the system. So for Cody Anderson to get sent back down to AAA to kind of figure it out per se, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. It's just a matter of how does he go about doing that? Does he grind out film sessions? Does he watch tape? How many bullpen sessions does he throw? I know he's been praised for the offseason workout, but the work ethic he puts in between starts, maybe there's a question there. And he's a guy who the Indians, it was an asset to that team last year. He was an asset to that team, 7-3, 3.05 ERA. He only threw 91 in the 3rd innings, but he struck out 44. So, it's just a matter of, I think he's got to find it. I think he's got to he's got to get used to his own body. And if he lost that much weight, then that's got to be the issue.
Yeah, you know what? And to use another analogy, I think about what I was just thinking about this now. I think about what happened with Jose Ramirez last year. Remember the first half of last season when Jose Ramirez was the starting shortstop and how poorly he had played through the first few months of the season? I mean, he was flat out terrible. And offensively, base running, you name it. He just could not get the job done in any shape or form. And I liken that to a guy who's looking over his shoulder. He gets a job, starting shortstop job at spring training last year. But he knows that there's a guy named Francisco Lindor sitting down in Columbus who was just waiting to get that call to Cleveland to take his job. And I think that maybe that might have gotten to him, and he was trying too hard so that when that eventuality does come to fruition and Lindor does come to Cleveland, he wants to prove he's still worth keeping around. But I'm wondering if the same thing is happening with Cody Anderson, where he's a guy who's up in Cleveland, and there's not really just one guy in Columbus, but there's a bunch of guys. You know, we mentioned the big guy is Clevinger, but there are other guys like Ryan Merritt or Will Roberts who are pitching well in Columbus, and he won. And you have to wonder if maybe the early struggles are him, and he was trying to try too hard and pitch out of those struggles. Can avoid being sent down, and maybe now that has finally happened, he has been sent down. Maybe now he could just like, all right, this has happened. This is how it is. Now I could just focus on what I need to do to fix what I have here and try to get back on track.
Yeah, I just think that it's not, to the points you're making, it's not good for a pitcher, because if they worry about all that kind of stuff, you know, there's a guy that's performing, you know, with me. It's his peer, essentially. You talk about a guy like a Merritt or even a Clevinger. Those are his peers, but yet if you get that in your head, if you let your teammates get in your head, and I know the minor leagues, you're learning to pitch and you're learning to develop, but at the same time you are to an extent competing for that call up. So for a guy like a Cody Anderson to get that in his head, you have to start thinking maybe he's overthrown a little bit. Maybe he's reaching back a little too far for that extra 2 miles an hour. So maybe that's an attribution to his you know, his high ERA, his walk rate isn't bad, but like I said, opponents are hitting 359 off him. So, you know, he's getting the ball right in the zone. It's just, you know, to the wrong people. So maybe it's an issue of overthrowing. Maybe it's an issue of the mechanics. Maybe it's the body. But no, when you have players competing for a job, you know, and it goes for anything in life. If you have people competing for a job, sometimes you might try a little too hard and you might fall flat on your face. Not that Cody's done or anything, but, you know, I just think that might have hindered him a bit. He might have gotten a little, you mentioned earlier, he might have gotten in his own head a little too bit. Maybe that could have attributed to that.
Yeah, and I've been listening to the book Where Nobody Knows Your Name by John Feinstein, which is about life in the minor leagues. And go down to Columbus yet in my lifetime or see the AAA environment from an inside perspective, but from what I listened to, because I had this book on CD, from what I listened to from this book, the AAA environment is, while, you know, these guys are teammates and they don't have any real animosity towards each other, the AAA environment is very tense in that while everybody is a team and, you know, you guys are friends, teammates, whatever, you're still competing, like you said, for that major league call-up. And that can affect guys who maybe are in the major leagues, who are kind of fringe guys, or at least for the time being are fringe guys like Cody Anderson. And you start looking at the guys down in AAA who are performing well and start wondering that if they're going to be coming up to take your job. And I think that was the case with Ramirez last year, clearly, and it could be the case with Anderson, maybe not to the same extent, but I think that maybe it's a combination of the weight loss, maybe thrown off his mechanic, he had a velocity he hasn't been able to harness, and then maybe that snowballed into frustration and then just create a whole mess for him on the mound, and now he just needs to go down to AAA and just hit the reset button.
I'm sure it happens everywhere too, and it's not just pitching. I'm sure it extends out. You know, you got guys even in the Indian system. You look at an Eric Gonzalez or a Ronnie Rodriguez or one of those infielders that they might be pushed back a little bit because of a Giovanni Urshela or a Francisco Lindor. Imagine how tough it must be for the shortstop in the Indian system. Any given shortstop, whether it's Gonzalez or whether you go all the way down to Lake County and Willie Castro or, you know, even a Luke Wakamatsu or whoever is going to be in Mahoning Valley or the Arizona League, all the way down through the system. You have Francisco Lindor in Cleveland. He's 22 years old. He's going to be there for quite a while. Second in the American League Rookie of the Year voting, slowly becoming the face of that franchise. It's just, it's got to be tough, and it happens everywhere, you have to think. Regardless if there's a star player or if there's a young player that might be ahead of somebody, that's going to be frustrating. And, You mentioned the book you're reading, John Feinstein, and I bet he makes good points about it. I haven't read it myself. It sounds like a great book, but you're in the minor leagues and you're stuck behind a Francisco Lindor player. What do? You look at Jose Ramirez. He's a shortstop. He's a little behind Lindor, or rather he's in Cleveland, but Lindor's right in his rearview mirror coming up on him. So you got to learn a new position. You got to learn how to play the outfield. You got to learn third base. You may have to learn second base. You got to kind of become one of those, as I call them, B-teamers who can play everywhere. A la Josh Harrison in Pittsburgh. He's a perfect example. Or Ben Zobrist in Chicago, who can play pretty much anywhere. And that gives managers flexibility. So I think as time progresses, you start seeing a young, like a Lindor, or heck, even out in Los Angeles with the Mike Trout, who's arguably one of the 3 best hitters in this game. You might have a guy in the Angels farm system that is sitting behind Trout, and it's like, well, where's my chance? Well, you're not going to be playing center field in Anaheim anytime soon, so you might want to go learn left or right field or what may have you. It's got to be tough anyway. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, so Anderson down at Columbus. Hopefully he gets things straightened out now. The other guy sent down in this whole transaction was Tyler Naquin. And we were talking about this a little bit before we went on the air. And you are of the fence. I like Tyler Naquin. I think he deserves a chance in Cleveland. But what he's done, while he has hit well, I have been somewhat underwhelmed by him, and the defensive metrics bear that out. But you're of the belief, which is a popular opinion right now in Cleveland, that the Indians are not giving Naquin a fair shot.
No, and kind of a semi-live update. Clevinger has struck Joey Votto out again. But the issue I have, the issue I have with Naquin, he's batting .317. He's getting on base 33% of the time. He scored 10 runs out of, he's had 20 hits. He scored 10 runs out of that. He's producing at the plate to an extent where you can think, okay, the defense will come. I thought the defense in AAA was fair. I thought the defense in AA was fair. I think he's a fine center fielder, but you draft this kid so high, first round, 15th overall, back in 2012. You draft this kid so high, you groom him throughout every level of your system. You let him grind all the way up from Mahoning Valley. I remember going back to watch him play with the Scrappers, all the way up into AAA in Columbus. And now, think of it this way. He's a bass in a lake or a river or a stream, what have you, and you're fishing, and you're throwing a line out there, and just before he can go nibble on that bait so he can reel him in, you're pulling that line in a little bit too early. That's what I feel like the Indians are doing with Naquin. I don't like how they keep jostling him, all right, go ahead down AAA, bring him back up to Cleveland. We need a 4th outfielder. I think if you're going to put him somewhere, the kid's 24 years old. He's not exactly, your 21-year-old. He's not exactly a Francisco Lindor age, or he's 25 rather. But you just can't. If you're going to bring him up, leave him. Leave him be. If he's going to be the 4th outfielder, so be it. Let him pinch run. Let him get the big league environment. Let him take that in, because next season, if you're going to have Zimmer or Frazier ready to go next season, you might not have Rajai Davis or Marlon Byrd next season. You might have to play him. And having him develop his game in Cleveland, I think if he can learn on the bench in Cleveland, it might be a little more valuable at this point than playing every day in Columbus. Think of in the NFL, you have a backup quarterback, a young quarterback that might want to, you draft pretty high, but do you start him or do you let him play behind a veteran and learn the system? Of course in baseball it's different, but that's kind of another thing I can relate it to. It's like, do you want to get him playing time? Do you want to get him in the big league environment? I don't like what they're doing with him. If you're going to put him somewhere, just keep him there.
Yeah, and I certainly do understand that argument. And here's the thing: I have seen Naquin play quite a bit the last couple of years in Akron. When he had those injuries that kind of set back his development a bit. Those were unfortunate, but when he's playing well, when he's played well, I've seen what he can do both offensively and defensively. And offensively, he's to the standard he set in the minor leagues. But defensively, I think I have higher expectations for him, and he just has not good as maybe he could be in Cleveland. And his, like I said, the stats bear that out. I'm pulling up his Fangraphs page now, but he's batting over 300, but his batting average on balls in play in Cleveland this year is 476. So that's definitely something to be wary of, because that mark is very likely to regress at some point, and then you have to wonder how much his actual batting numbers will regress. And then looking at his fielding stats, so far this season in center field, he's played 160 in the third innings. And his UZR is -3, and he has -8 defensive run save. So his fielding numbers are definitely not great. So even though it is a small sample size, but anytime you have that ultimate zone rating numbers in the negative, it's not a good thing. And not saying that Rajay Davis has been much better, but he has been played than Naquin. Not much better, but he has been better. So that would be my kind of counterpoint, and why I think this is where the Indians are coming from. But I definitely understand why maybe he should be given the chance to play every day and see if he can rectify that in Cleveland.
It's what I hope for. I think he's a fine player. I think, the defense, there's going to be growing pains with the defense, defending, center field out in progressive field as compared to down in Columbus. I think there's an adjustment to be made there, but the bat's done well. He's a pretty average, above average base runner. I just think that at this rate in his progression, you drafted him 4 years ago. You groomed him through every level of the system. If you're going to put him somewhere at this point, he's 25 years old. If you're going to put him somewhere at this point for, whatever part of the season, if it's the majority of the season, just leave him there. If you want to bring him up in Cleveland next year, of course, do it, to let him be that starting center fielder maybe that you really want. Look at Giovanni Urshela. They weren't really confident in his bat, so they went out and got Juan Uribe to go play third base, and they haven't touched Urshela yet. He stayed down in AAA for the whole season, and who knows when he'll be back up. But as for now, we're not talking about Giovanni Urshela, because there's no, hey, I think we're going to bring him up now. I think he's ready, and then a week later they send him back down. So if you're going to put him somewhere, leave him there.
Yeah, I think we can all agree to that. If you're gonna put him anywhere, just leave him be. Don't jerk him around like this. I can definitely agree that this bouncing back and forth thing is not in his best interest. So, if he's gonna be in Cleveland, bring him up and keep him here. If he's gonna stay in Columbus, if you want him to get everyday at bats, if you want him to work on things down there, then let him stay down there and work on them. Don't bring him back up and send him back down just whenever you need that fourth outfielder or whoever or whatever the case may be. But we kind of went long on these first couple topics, so I wanted to get into a couple of the other things. We won't get to all the things we plan to talk about tonight, but I did want to talk about this guy, Ronnie Rodriguez, because somebody brought this up to me on Twitter, asking me what Ronnie Rodriguez's status is with the Indians. And you know what? At first, I was like, I got to be honest, I don't know what Ronnie Rodriguez's status with the Indians. Is he still a prospect? Is he still being considered for a call-up? Because he's still young. He's a versatile guy. He can play second. He plays first. I think he could still play a little short, maybe some third. But I'm pulling up his stats now. But he's playing very well for Columbus right now. Batting right around 300, and recently he's been shifted to the leadoff spot for the Clippers, so probably because of how well he's been hitting. But I remember back in 2013, I think it was, the last year that the Rubber Ducks were still the Arrows, the infield consisted of Jose Ramirez at second, Ronnie Rodriguez at short, Giovanni Urshela at third, and I think Jesus Aguilar at first, and then eventually Lindor came up to join them. But for a while, Ronnie Rodriguez was right up there with like a Jose Ramirez as far as prospect pedigree goes. And as numbers up now, batting .306 in 30 games with the Clippers. He has 2 home runs, 19 RBIs, 8 doubles, 3 triples. That his strikeout to walk ratio, he's only times he also only walked 4 times, but OPS of 817, and like I said, he's still young. He's only what, 24. I mean, that's still young for AAA by AAA standards, I guess. But Corey, when you look at Ronnie Rodriguez, I mean, I know you haven't had a chance to see much of him since your focus is more on the lower levels of the minor leagues. But what when you look at Ronnie Rodriguez?
Honestly, what jumps out to me is efficiency. His ability to run base paths, his on-base percentage this season is at .336. That's pretty decent. Moving him up to a leadoff spot may have helped that. You know, I'm comparing him to Urshela right now because they're kind of in the same. I mean, they're in the same competition level, but they're in different scenarios. I think Ronnie's kind of coming up. Gio, I don't want to say he's coming down, but he spent time in Cleveland. They sent him back down to AAA to kind of figure the bat out. And it's almost like Ronnie has kind of surpassed Giovanni in that regard. Urshela's hitting .283. Ronnie's hitting .313 on the season. Ronnie's only logged 4 more at bats. They both played the same amount of games, so I like him on a come up per se. But we talk about the depth in the infield in this organization. You got Lindor at short, followed by the Eric Gonzalez's and the Eric Stammetz's, if you will. Of course, Juan Uribe isn't going to be a mainstay in Cleveland for a while, but could Ronnie Rodriguez pass Urshela up? And I know Urshela's defense is great. I know how good he is with the glove. But this is interesting to me because, you look at a Ronnie Rodriguez and an Eric Gonzalez, and I know Michael Martinez has seen time in Cleveland, but those 3 guys, the middle infield, and, Ronnie can play third base, but those 3 guys get lost in the shuffle quite a bit. And I think Ronnie's an interesting prospect. The only issue I'm reading right now with him is he doesn't draw enough walks. He's only drawn 4 walks in 119 plate appearances. So I'd like to see that number go up. It shows his aggression at the plate, which we like to see to an extent, but 19 strikeouts to 4 walks. I'd like to see that number come in closer a little bit. But Ronnie's bagged 56 total bases to Urshela's 44. He runs the bases well when he gets on. He's only stolen a base. Urshela hasn't stolen anything yet, so they're not really using him in that regard, but he's a smart base runner. He's a smart hitter. He's a smart fielder. I just think that he's on the rise as a prospect, and we should start paying attention to him.
Yeah, and he played a lot, I don't know, it was last year or the year before in Akron. He was last year he played a lot in Akron. Or he actually played in the Pan Am Games. He represented the Dominican Republic in the Pan Am Games last summer, so he had some time away from the organization to do that. And since he came back, he was really playing very well for Akron. Batted .286 in 72 games, had a surprising power surge, 11 home runs, 14 doubles. So slugging percentage was .491. Yeah, but he only had 29 RBIs, so he wasn't really driving into runs. But depending on what you believe about RBIs, they could be very subjective anyway. But here's what I wonder with Ronnie Rodriguez: if Michael Martinez wasn't in the system and wasn't with Cleveland, will we be hearing more about Ronnie Rodriguez as a potential call-up option for the Indians as kind of that utility infielder type guy? If Michael Martinez was not here in Cleveland. The guy we could be hearing more about if that was the case?
Short answer, yes, and I feel the same way about Eric Gonzalez.
Yeah, I think so too, and I would give him the edge over Eric Gonzalez just because he's played multiple positions longer than Eric Gonzalez has. Gonzalez is still kind of testing the waters a little bit at other positions. even though his primary position is still shortstop. So that's why I give Rodriguez the edge there. But the last thing I wanted to talk about, and I know you'll be excited to talk about him, but let's talk about Kaya Tom in Lake County. Played 15 games so far for the Captains, and he is off to a red-hot start, batting .383, 2 doubles, a triple, 6 RBIs. He's already walked 15 times and only struck out 10 as a couple stolen bases. I know you saw a lot of this guy in Mahoning Valley last year. To see him get off to such a great start for Lake County, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, getting to know him last year was great. He's a great person, nice guy. One thing about Tom that I really liked watching him, you talk about that walk number, he is so patient at the plate. He waits and waits and waits. He does not, he does not swing at any garbage. He has a great eye at the plate, and that's what I like about him. The thing about Tom, he's compact. I think he's only listed at 5'9" or something like that, so he's not going to – I don't think he's going to develop this huge power bat, but he can poke the ball out to all fields, and that's one thing that Travis Fryman, when he managed Mahoning Valley last year, talked about, is that he has the ability to hit the ball to all fields, and he has the ability for gap power, and he has the ability to steal a base or two. I believe he was in the top 10 in the New York Penn League in terms of on base, and I think steals. So, last year in Mahoning Valley, I got treated with Willie Castro and Mark Mathias and Kai Tom. Those were the big three in that lineup. I love what I'm seeing so far with him in Lake County, and coming off that shoulder surgery in the offseason, so far he's looked great. I'm happy for him.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see him play because I'll actually be heading up to Lake County on Thursday. I'll be doing some filming for our IBI on Site show. We'll be doing a Lake County themed episode, so watch out for that. But yeah, excited to see Tom. Excited to see guys like Tyler Krieger, Willie Castro, Connor Maribel is having a great start for Lake County. Francisco Mejia, and then some of these pitchers who we'll get to in future episodes. But yeah, Lake County, not a power hitting team like some of the other affiliates in the organization, but definitely team to watch, and I'm looking forward to it. But we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here for today, for this week. It's been a lot of fun. We're excited. Clevinger and guys who are making their Major League debut, who we've been able to follow over the last few years in the Indians farm system. It's always a thrill for me getting to see guys. Over the last few years, I've seen guys like Francisco Lindor, Tyler Naquin, Giovanni Urshela, and now Mike Clevinger, guys who I got to know a lot in Akron. And just it's so exciting for me. And we've got more guys coming up, and we'll be there to tell you all about them throughout the course of the season. On Twitter, I'm at Jake D Baseball. Corey's at CD Crisan. Follow us for all the latest updates with the Farm Report podcast. We'll be sure to have more live on location podcasts, live remotes coming up. We'll keep you posted on that. We'll be sure to let you know when these episodes come to you each week. Because of our schedules, we're not set into one particular day or time slot. So yeah, be sure to follow us for all the latest updates. Corey, it's been a pleasure once again.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. I appreciate it. It's exciting. I'm happy for Clevinger. We're going to see more guys this year for sure. Clevinger's just the first of many. So great being back this week. We'll see you next week. Thanks again, those that tuned in.
All right, so that's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Jake Dungan, and we say to you, have a good one.